Hey guys, my name is JC, and today we're going to be playing the commander you think of when you think of death triggers, Teysa Karlov. This deck aims to abuse death triggers by drawing cards, making mana, and interacting with its opponents until it can execute one of its win conditions. Now, unlike most creature decks, it's much less affected by board wipes and removal, and therefore once the engines are set up, it can be very difficult for your opponents to interact with. Let's see if our opponents can stop us before it's too late. Alright, let's see who we're playing today. We have Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, we've got Nikya of the Old Ways, and we have Orvar the Allform. Alright, so if we look at our opening hand, I like it quite a bit. Bloodgust is a good recursion piece. We have 2 lands, Azulaport Cutthroat, and Sevin's Reclamation can act as ramp or it can return something important. We've got card draw as well, so I think we'll keep. Orvar starts us off by playing a tap land for turn, and that's it for them. We draw a Carrion Feeder for turn. So we'll start by playing our Bloodstained Mire, we'll immediately crack it, we'll go find our Godless Shrine, we'll have it come into play untapped, so we'll lose 2 life from that, and then we'll cast our Carrion Feeder. And that's going to be our turn done. Ragavan starts by playing a land, and they cast their commander, Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer. Whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn you may cast that card, and it has dash for 2 mana. And that's it for them. Nikya starts by playing a fetch land and they immediately crack it. They put a land into play, and that's the end of their turn. Orvar plays a tapped land, and it is a Field of the Dead, and then they follow that up with a Soul Ring. And now they tap that Soul Ring for a Star Compass. So the Orvar player's gotten off to a fast start this turn, and that's it for them. We draw a Brought Back. Well, that actually is a good draw considering we didn't get a land for turn. And I do think we need to ramp, especially considering how fast the Orvar players go in there. So let's start by playing our Prismatic Vista. We'll immediately crack it. We'll go find a Plains. And now we'll cast our Brought Back, targeting our Prismatic Vista. And that brings it back into play tapped. Then we'll move to combat. We'll swing in at the Orvar player as a reward for them doing so well their last turn. They take the hit, and then we leave the turn there. Ragavan plays a land. Then they move straight to combat, and they're swinging in at the Orvar player as well. Damage goes through, that triggers Ragavan, and they exile a Wayfarer's Bauble, which they do immediately play, and that's their turn done. Nikya plays a land, a Yavimaya Hollow, and then they cast a Fauna Shaman. You can pay a green, tap and discard a creature card to search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And that's the end of their turn. Orvar plays a land, and now they cast their commander, Orvar the Allform. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets 1 or more permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. And now they follow that up with an Aquatex Will, targeting their Field of the Dead. Put a flood counter on the land. That land is an island in addition to its other types, for as long as it has a flood counter on it, if you control a merfolk, draw a card. But with Orvar, all of these weird and wacky spells are essentially ways of copying permanents. Ragavan responds by cracking the Wayfarer's Bauble to search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So now Orvar has 2 Fields of the Dead, which is going to get pretty scary pretty quickly. But I think all eyes are on Orvar, so hopefully if the table bands together we can keep them in control a little bit. But that is the Orvar player's turn done. We draw a Dauthi Voidwalker. Well, let's start by cracking our Prismatic Vista. We'll get a Swamp into play. And I think I'd actually like to get the Dauthi Voidwalker down. So let's do that. That way we might be able to snipe up some really good cards as we hit the other player's turns. Now I won't go to combat, so I think we're just going to leave the turn there. Ragavan plays a land, and now they cast a Ruby Medallion. So red spells they cast cost 1 less to cast. Then they follow that up with a Loyal Apprentice. Haste, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. That token gains haste until end of turn. Now they move to combat, so that does trigger their Loyal Apprentice. They make a Thopter token. And now they swing the Thopter token over at Orvar. And the Ragavan at the Nikya player. Well, it's unlikely the Nikya player will block, but it looks like they actually are. I would have thought they would have wanted to keep that piece around to be able to tutor up the creatures they need, but it looks like they're more worried about giving Ragavan advantage. So Ragavan and Fauna Shaman go down there, and then Orvar takes a damage. And that's it for the Ragavan player's turn. Nikya plays a land, and then they cast a Yavimaya Dryad. When it ETBs, you may search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped under target player's control, then shuffle. And they are targeting themselves, so they put a land into play. Now in Nikya's second main phase, Orvar casts a Thermal Flux, targeting their island, so they make a copy of that island. And now we move to Nikya's end step, and that's the end of their turn. Orvar's Thermal Flux triggers, they draw a card. Now they play a land for turn. Now they begin by casting an Augur of Bolas. When it ETBs, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put it into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Let's see what they reveal. They find a Twitch, another targeting spell. That also does draw them a card as well. Now they cast their Twitch targeting their island, so they ramp in very well here. We're just lucky that their Field of the Dead is a little while away from being online, so we do have some time before the zombie horde starts to appear. And now they cast Strionic Resonator, so they can pay 2 and tap it to copy a target activated or triggered ability. And that's it for the Orvar player. We draw a Crowded Crypt for turn. Now we did miss a land drop again, which isn't too good. We really do need to be hitting our land drops to get ourselves into this game. So I think we have to play our Grim Haruspex here to start getting some card draw online. So let's cast that. That does resolve. And unfortunately we're just going to have to pass the turn there. But before Ragavan does anything, Orvar actually casts an Essence Flux, targeting their Augur of Bolas. And then they also activate Strionic Resonator to copy that ability. So they can flicker their creature here, which is of course going to make a copy of it. The only one saving grace for us at the moment is Douthy is exiling all of these cards that are being cast, so they're not going to be able to get them back with any recursion type loops. Augur does trigger, and they find themselves a Trait Doctrine. Now we move straight to combat. The Loyal Apprentice swings in at Nikya, and the Thopter swings in at Orvar. Now Nikya does block with their Yavimaya Dryad. Loyal Apprentice and Yavimaya go down, and now they cast a Blasphemous Act. Well, we will respond. We'll start by sacrificing our Douthy Voidwalker to begin with. That will trigger our Grim Haruspex, so we'll draw a card. And we draw a Skull Clamp, that's very good. Then we'll sacrifice itself, so we can draw another card. And we draw an Esper Sentinel. Well, not a land, but another way to draw cards. And then we'll pass priority on the Blasphemous Act. And that goes through, so it wipes the board, which is good, but the Orvar player is still pretty far ahead, even with the board wipe happening. Then Ragavan just recast their commander again, and they end the turn there. Nikya plays a tap land for turn, and then they cast a Sarith the Viper's Fang. Other tap creatures you control have Death Touch, other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof, and you can pay 1 and tap to untap another target creature or land you control. And that's the end of their turn. Orvar plays a land, and now they start by casting a Phyrexian Metamorph. Well, let's see what they copy here. It might be a Strionic Resonator. No, they actually copy the Sarith the Viper's Fang. Well, that is going to give their Orvar protection, so that's a little dangerous. Now they recast their commander Orvar the Allform, and that is their turn done. We draw a black market, so unfortunately our land starvation continues, which it's really starting to hurt us at the moment. So I think there's not too much choice here. We definitely have to land the Esper Sentinel because we need to draw cards, we need to draw into lands. So we'll start by casting that first, and then we'll follow that up with a Bloodghast. So that way next turn we can use our Skull Clamp. If we don't hit the lands or anything that we need, we can Skull Clamp the Bloodghast and be able to draw into some more cards. But that's going to be us done. Ragavan starts by casting a Thrill of Possibility. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card and draw 2 cards. That triggers our Esper Sentinel. And they don't pay for it, and we draw a land, thankfully. A Command Tower as well, which is good. They just discard a Balefire Dragon there. Now they play their land for turn. And then they cast an Imperial Recruiter. When it ETBs, they can search their library for a creature card with power 2 or less, reveal it, put it into their hand, and then shuffle. Well, let's see what they pick up. And they find Dockside Extortionist. Probably the most tutored target with an Imperial Recruiter. Now they immediately cast Dockside. Well, this should make a decent amount of treasures here, thanks to the Orvar player. But it's not going to be the worst Dockside Extortionist, that's for sure. They make 5 treasures. Now they start cracking the treasures. And they cast a Sword of Hearth and Home. A quick creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from green and white, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own, then search your library for a basic land card. Put both cards onto the battlefield under your control and shuffle. Now they are equipping their Sword of Hearth and Home onto Ragavan. They move to combat. They send Ragavan at the Nikya player. Nikya can't block here, so damage goes through. That triggers Ragavan and their sword. They flicker their Dockside Extortionist. Now Dockside will make another 5 treasure tokens. So the Ragavan player's definitely got a nice board set up and value engine on mine. I was worried about Orvar, but Ragavan certainly come back quickly. Now they also exiled a Manglehorn from the Nikya player. And now they cast that Manglehorn. Let's see where they point the Manglehorn trigger. It's probably going to be at the Orvar player, and they do. They target the Stronic Resonator. That goes down. Now Ragavan begins sacking some other treasures. And they cast a Combustible Gearhulk. When it ETBs, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you mill 3 cards, and then it deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of the cards. They are targeting Orvar. Let's see if they give them the cards or not, or they're happy to take the damage. I mean, their life total is pretty high at the moment, so they might just be happy to take the damage. And they do opt to take the damage. It looks like they took about 10 damage there as well. And that's it for the Ragavan player. Nikya plays a land, and it is a Scavenging Grounds. So we have to remember that because we do rely on our graveyard a bit. And now they cast a Bane of Progress, blowing up all artifacts and enchantments on the board. Well, maybe we're a little happy that we're behind because this interaction isn't affecting us at all at the moment. And that's brought the Orvar player back a bit, which is nice to see. And it's also slowed down the Ragavan player from doing Dockside loops. And that's it for the Nikya player. Orvar plays a land for turn. And they start by casting Agent of Treachery. Well, that's a very scary card in an Orvar deck. What are they going to target here, though? That's the question. Maybe Dockside Extortionist so they can copy it themselves, even though it isn't going to be doing much at the moment. And they actually target the Sarith the Viper's Fang from the Nikya player, so they don't want them to have protection. And they're also giving themselves protection. Now they cast a Trait Doctoring targeting their Agent of Treachery, so they're going to make another copy of Agent. And if they're able to make one more copy, they're going to be drawing a lot of cards at the end of their turn. So we thought Orvar was slowed down here, but they certainly weren't. And they do exile Trait Doctrine under their Orvar. So now when Orvar hits with combat damage, they can cast that spell again. And they swing Orvar in at us. Bloodghast can't block, so we have to take the damage. We can't do anything about it. So Orvar is going to get their third Agent of Treachery. Now the agent is targeting the Bane of Progress. And look at that board state all in one turn for the Orvar player. Turned around very quickly. So now with 3 agents on their end step, they're going to draw 3 cards for each trigger. So that's 9 cards in hand in total. And the rest of the table is in a lot of trouble here. And that's it for them. We draw another land for turn. We'll start by playing our command tower. Then I think we'll just ramp with a Crowded Crypt. I don't think that's going to be a target that the Orvar player is going to want. At least compared to some of the others on board. Unless they start stealing lands, of course. But we're not in a position to put down any of our permanents. And I certainly don't want to get Teysa down with an Agent of Treachery out there. So that enters tapped because of the Manglehorn. And even though I don't want to, I will put the Skull Clamp into play. Because we can't wait any longer. The Orvar player is going off at the moment, so we're just going to have to play out what we can. And hope we get to our next turn, or at least the other 2 players shut down the Orvar player. And that's going to be it for us. Ragavan plays a tapped land. And now they cast a Thran Dynamo. Now they move to combat. And they're swinging Ragavan over Nikya's way. They take the damage and Ragavan triggers. They make a treasure and get a Somberwald Sage. And that's the end of their turn. And the Nikya player actually scoops there. So they mustn't have drawn an answer. And now with less players in the game, there's less things that Orvar needs to steal. Now they do play a land for turn, a Thespian Stage. Now they cast a Thieving Skydiver, X equals 5. Which is likely going to be targeting the Thran Dynamo. And it is. So they take that. Now they cast their own Sword of Hearth and Home. Which is just even more ways to flicker Agent of Treachery. So short of a board wipe here, I think this game is pretty much done. It's going to be very hard for us to get out of here. Maybe Ragavan has another board wipe. They move to equip their Sword of Hearth and Home to one of the Agent of Treacheries. And now we have the Ragavan player scoop. So now they just move to combat. They send in all of their creatures that they can at us. We'll have to take the damage. That triggers Orvar and Sword of Hearth and Home. That gives them an agent trigger and they target our Bloodghast. Now they're able to recast their Trait Doctoring. But they don't, and they just end the turn there. We draw a Martyr's Cause for turn. Well, from the looks of things, guys, I think we're probably going to be done. I can't really see a way out of this. If we drew into Live in Death, maybe. But we're not going to be able to probably cast it this turn, so we'll play our Plains for turn. If we play our Zulaport Cutthroat and then Skull Clamp it, that's assuming that they don't interact at instant speed, which they probably will be able to with all of the cards they drew last turn. Look, we won't give up until we're completely out of it, but yeah, I think this is definitely over. So we'll start by casting Zulaport Cutthroat. Then we'll try to equip the Zulaport Cutthroat here with our Skull Clamp. That goes through, so that'll trigger our Crowded Crypt. It gets a counter. We draw 2 cards, Amiria's Call and Teysa, and then our opponent loses a life and we gain a life. Then we'll just try to get back our Esper Sentinel. Maybe draw a card, but very unlikely, and if by some miracle we get back to our next turn, maybe Skull Clamp it. So we'll target Esper Sentinel. That goes through, and that's going to be our turn done. Now they start by casting Secrets of the Golden City. Draw 2 cards. If you have the City's Blessing, draw 3 instead. So they will draw 3. They pay for our Esper Sentinel. They play a land for turn. And now they transmute their Dizzy spell. And that is a 1 mana value card, so they'll be able to go search their library up for a 1 mana value card. They find themselves a Swan Song. Now they move to combat, sending in everything. We'll just block the Orvar here so they can't copy their Agent of Treachery, even though it's very likely they probably can. They flicker their Agent of Treachery. Now at ETBs, they attempt to gain control of our planes. Now they cast Search for Azcanta. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put it into your graveyard, and then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can transform it. And it can tap for blue, or you can pay 3 mana and look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them, and put them into your hand. And that's the end of their turn. We draw a land for turn, so not the living death that we wanted. So we'll play that land. So I think I'm going to call GG here, guys, because I can't see us finding an out, and I think our opponent might be being nice to us. I imagine with all the cards that they've drawn that they probably have a way of stealing more things than they actually are, but they're just giving us a little bit of a chance. So I think we'll leave it here. I'll give them the GG. So let's go to the game review and discuss what happened. Well, this definitely wasn't our game. We were given the gift of a great opening hand and the punishment of drawing no lands after. So sorry Teysa players, if you wanted to see what she can do, this game wasn't it. The Nikya player wasn't too far behind us in all honesty. They had a relatively slow start, and besides casting that Bane of Progress, their impact on the game was relatively low. The Ragavan player did much better, and at one point they had a strong value engine online. But unfortunately, even after they interacted with the Orvar player, they were still too far behind, and once the Agent of Treachery landed, it was pretty much game over. Speaking of Orvar, they had a great game. They had the early Soul Ring into Mana Rock start, which set them far ahead, and once they landed their commander and started to accumulate a lot of value, it was simply too much for the rest of the table to overcome, even after that blasphemous act. Well, that's it for today's video. Even though we didn't get to see Teysa do a thing, we certainly did with Orvar, and at the end of the day, these games are about showcasing all the decks at the table, not just ours. Until next time, guys.